This is Marco Reus.
This is Shinji Kagawa.
This is Nuri Shahin.
Hello, this is Jadon Sancho.
And you're listening to the Yellow Wall podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 468 of the Yellow Wall Pod. I'm your Stefan Butzko, and today we will talk about Borussia Dortmund's 1-1 draw away to PSV Eindhoven. And for that, I'm joined by Abel Meszaros. Abel, a long-time co-host of the Yellow Wall Pod. I'm glad to have you back. It's been a while. How are you doing?
Yeah. Thanks for reaching out. I always enjoy coming back. It's nice to talk to you again. We sometimes talk, but yeah, it's good to also do it on a podcast. And I don't know, no better time to do it when there's a PSV Champions League game against our good friend Peter Bosz.
I know. It was a intriguing game in many ways, but I must say I've been a little bit disappointed by PSV. I thought that they would dominate Dortmund even better, especially their pressing would be giving Dortmund a little bit more trouble. But overall, I thought Dortmund made it through the night quite in shape and have now very good chances to go through to the quarterfinals after the 1-1 draw. Obviously a very controversial penalty call that did help PSV, but aber overall though, bigger picture, all the words I just said does hint that Dortmund are not doing too well on the football field. Why do you think that is currently that Dortmund are really struggling to contain a side like PSV over 90 minutes?
Yeah, I think I'm not even sure if there's like an intention necessarily. Like I got the overarching impression from that game was that like Dortmund were pretty happy to get like a draw, and I think even
you can
said
tell
something
that the away goal rule is no longer enacted because
right.
Dortmund were time wasting starting by the 70th minute, and there was zero urgency to even go for the winner.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting what like Hummels and Emre Can. Like Emre Can was something talking about how they were hiding, which is somewhat ironic given he's the one saying it. But Hummels has also mentioned about how like I thought it was like a double meaning about how they you know, like they contain them, but with a little more organization and sort of precision and possession, they'll do well. Which I think I don't think he meant it that way, but I think it's like sort of there's an irony there. That's also kind of the issue that they've had is that I don't know like what this team's identity is in terms of what do they want to do with the ball, what do they, and I don't know what they want to do it, and how do they want to execute those things. Is this team like capable of having sort of that level of precision? Or like, is it a team that I think like we saw in the group games where they're pretty happy to keep these games close and kind of win on luck or talent in many ways. And yeah, like in this game, I think, the penalty was ridiculous, I think. But like, before that, I felt like, you know, Tillman had three good chances. PSV were pretty easily bypassing. But then I also thought like Peter Bosz was probably more pragmatic than which is I think no Dortmund fans are going to believe it. But I think he's somewhat, and I'm happy to talk to you about the approach. But I thought that was the general theme of the game of like. Nobody seemed too unhappy with the draw with PSV, obviously pushing for a little more, but not at like all cost.
That is true. I would say that for Peter Bosz side, that was very pragmatic because they did not allow themselves to be counterattacked to shreds. Now, maybe they would have if Dortmund's counterattacks were a little bit more precise than they were in this game because there was a lot of sloppiness on top of it all. If we want to discuss tactics. Maybe things would have worked out better for the black and yellows if especially Jadon Sancho or Ian Maatsen had much better games on the left side, sort of the more creative outlets. I thought that Marco Reus's ball distribution wasn't great either, and Sabitzer and Can obviously also not their very best games. I thought Eindhoven did well to take Füllkrug out of the game quite well, and of course that did slow things down significantly for Dortmund. I don't even recall that many chances apart from the Malen goal, which was obviously brilliant, but also I think it was slightly deflected.
Yeah,
so Dortmund were somewhat lucky on that one.
Yeah.
But yeah, when you watch Dortmund these days, Abel, you just said no identity. It was funny, a funny comparison because PSV posted this video of son talking to his old father about the new PSV and their identity, and I was just thinking, well, if I was in the marketing department of Dortmund and tried to recreate this video, what would the son even have to tell his father what this team is all about? Because I would have no idea. So
yeah, I think that's what makes it like, to the extent that, I mean, there is some remaining left of fandom for BVB in me, sort of deeper down as the last couple of years have shown. But it's really kind of tough to watch the games from that perspective. But even from like an analytical perspective, it's also like a very sort of little that's repeated or that's sort of intentional. Like, you can definitely see some of the ideas, but it's more like the details are missing. So like, you know, inverting Maatsen has been like a thing since January, right? And in the earlier parts of the first couple of games in Bundesliga, that took teams by surprise. But now I think there's more of an adjustment. Like, definitely PSV, the way their defensive game plan was doubling the half spaces, defending very narrow. So they were always ignoring kind of the far side. And I think, you know, when it's Ryerson, yeah, it's fine to ignore him. And then they also were like, okay, betting on themselves to recover if the ball gets all the way over precisely to Jadon Sancho, which I don't really think it ever did. Or the times that it did, it was more like broken play transition. And then they dealt with that. But they were pretty like happy with like pressing, but it wasn't like, you know, they were pressing with 5 at most. It was very rarely like fullback on fullback pressing. Like, I think Serginho Dest did it once or twice, but for the most part, they were just happy to keep the back 4, and keep like a higher line, but confident that Dortmund aren't really like, who's gonna run in behind, right? I mean, you know, Füllkrug isn't that type of a player, and then like, you know, even Malen and Sancho are more ball to feet. Reus, you know, again, not that type of player. So isn't really in midfield runners, again, not that much. So I think it made sense for them to sort of start higher, but maybe not need to press all the way out. And it's not like, you know, Dortmund have that build up detailed in the sense that, you know, even if they make that 3-2 with Maatsen, as they did in the first 15-20 minutes a couple times, and there's like the rotations, right, between the front 4, and they can pick up in different positions, but it isn't like coherent in a sense that there aren't like sort of very easy to spot patterns, and it's not like the ball flows, you know. And I think that's the biggest criticism for Terzic in that sense, is that you look at the teams in Germany, all the way from Stuttgart, Leverkusen, St. Pauli, you know, all the way down to, I don't know, HSV, Paderborn. You can go on and on, like with much lesser resources and probably even, and coaches who aren't necessarily as renowned, and they've had and then been less like sort of spent less time in a job, and they've been able to like create an in possession plan, right? So I think that's the biggest criticism is what do they do with the ball, and some of the numbers, if you want, I can go into that in terms of like how they are down. So like just even for like last season, you know, like the field tilt, which measures like sort of attacking third involvement, is down like from 58 to 53. So it's like 5th or 6th in the league. So they're not spending as much time in the opposition third, right? So like on the individual level as well. I mean, Malen's numbers are down in terms of like being able to carry the ball. Like and if you look at like really any statistical measure, very few Dortmund players show up in the top 10, and Malen will show up in the goals, but a lot of it is like, 0.10 XG chance that he finishes because he's a great finisher. But if you look at most of the games, even the ones they win, it's like either they score very early, like against Freiburg, and then they're okay, or they have massive problems against teams with intensity and a good game plan, and it's not that hard now, from Heidenheim to Wolfsburg. And then maybe they win on talent, like against Darmstadt, or maybe they don't, or maybe that team kind of gets tired, or, they kind of win on luck, or Kobel's in great form, like in the Champions League, he's at like 3.9 goals saved above average. So there's been a lot of that, I think. And then, yeah, I don't think like the defensive stuff is all that great, but probably the end of this long and tenuous rant is the goals. So I think they're almost under 2 goals for the first time since 2017, which I think really tells you kind of everything about Dortmund, which is on paper, like you still have all of this talent on the team, right? From Sancho on to everyone, and that's the end result.
Yeah, it's probably one of the gravest underperformances of Dortmund, considering their resources. They are still the second richest team in Germany, and it does not show at all currently. Really doesn't look like it whatsoever. I mean, in Dortmund's defense, Jude Bellingham left, and then they tried to replace him with Mecha, who has been pretty much injured all season. Obviously, Adeyemi's hamstrings have been cooked ever since the Chelsea game. Sebastian Aller is probably a more tragic story, which obviously is also a lot of transfer invested is unavailable. So, but these things happen to multiple clubs, and Emre Can, I'm pretty sure, is not just earning $1.50 a day. So these are all guys on high wages that should be performing much, much better, but aren't. So from that standpoint, I still think the talent available for this particular game is high enough to see a better brand of football, I would say, even though people do say that Dortmund need to have a lot of change in personnel. So that is sort of my opinion right now, that Dortmund are not really utilizing the potential they have. So they need to have much, much better player to have them underperform to still better perform, I guess is the strategy. So my question to you, Abel, is, do you think at the end of the season, Dortmund need to sack Terzic and hire a different coach, or do you think they can figure it out with him and Nuri Sahin and Sven Benner as assistant coaches?
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting, right? Like, because when the Sahin appointment or those news broke, like, I think I wasn't really the only one who was like, well, this is sort of with one eye towards the future, right? And now there's like news about Kale and potentially Marcus Krusche as the challenger, or, and then there's still, I think, in everyone's back of the mind, there's the Nagelsmann rumors after the Euros maybe, and now I think, talk about the other coaching impacts and moves in the Bundesliga. But I think the long and short answer is the same. Like, I think they do realize that they need to move on because it's I think there's, like you were talking about marketing, there's obviously a great amount of marketing of, in some ways, like he is the most marketable coach inside of Germany for sure, like that they've had since Klopp, right? Like just whole sort of being a guy who was on the terraces and from the area, and assistant coach, and that was his thing, is that he is also a tactician who gets along with players. Now I'm talking more about the image than necessarily the reality, but I think it's probably like even last year, right? Like, that basically throwing away the title that wasn't really theirs to win in some ways, right? Because of like the pre-World Cup debacles to this crazy run with Malen and everyone and Brandt and Bellingham, to like another now like again like not a great start in the Hinrunde, and again somewhat saved by Champions League, but though I would argue that there was a lot of luck in those games. But more importantly, it's just sort of like, what is this team in terms of how do they want to play? But I think even beyond that is like, what's Dortmund known for? You know, like, because it would be all these things like attractive football and 82,000 people and developing all these young talent that they can, you know, from whether it's sort of homegrown like a Shahin, and now there's not really anyone like that, right? And there's also not like the Erling Haaland, Jude Bellingham, Jadon Sancho anymore, and you know, like
ironically, there's Jadon Sancho right there.
Well, yeah, but he's there on like on the Shahin deal, right? Where he went somewhere else and didn't do well, and now he's on like a kind of resurrecting his career kind of deal, which I think is smart from Dortmund's standpoint, but it's like there's not really an expectation that he's gonna stay, right?
I mean, Dortmund do have Bino Gittens and Duranville, who are not quite there yet, but you think that the talent level might be there for them to have a bigger breakthrough. And I mean, Adeyemi, if he wasn't injured every 5 minutes, I think could be a pretty big player too. He's just utilizing his pace.
I'm with you on Bino Gittens. Like he's got like amazing numbers, and like he's the best progressive carrier. He's the best at getting into the box for some of the data in the Bundesliga, and
just why it was a real head scratcher when Marius Wolf came on after.
Yeah, that's another one where and again, like, I think that's just you understand it from it's a knockout in the Champions League, and I think Terzic tends to be risk averse in many of these situations. And I think that's certainly defensible in some ways, but as like sort of a fan and sort of it's kind of disappointing in the sense that, because it's like I wanted to mention this about PSV as well, is that like I watched them a little bit for something else, and like it's amazing that this team won 16 games in a row in Eredivisie, because if you look at like who the players are, it's like basically, you know, Luc de Jong, who I think everyone's familiar with, and then a lot of guys who are kind of returning, like a Serginho Dest or Lozano, who, you know, didn't really do that well as well, or like young guys like Bakayoko, who's probably the biggest kind of upcoming star, but he was sort of not healthy completely, like he was sick before the game, and he's getting so much out of these, you know, like, you know, I mean, Andre Ramalho is still prominently involved, although he didn't play this game, but like it's I think it's more down to Peter Bosz as a coach, as like getting this much out of this squad. And then you look at Dortmund and you say, okay, well, we've got Julian Brandt, who I think still, okay, inconsistencies, of course, but, you know, many people would love to have Bino Gittens as well. And then, okay, there's still injuries, but even with the injuries, like, still there's a Mukoko, like, there's still Zula is there. Like, it's just, I'm just talking about, like, the bench players as well. It's pretty insane. Like, I don't think I'm too sympathetic towards the squad isn't good enough, which is always the number one excuse. But then, and then, of course, it's like, who put that squad together, right? Like, it's not like, you know, it didn't just come magically, right? And I think Terzic, whether as a sporting director previously, which is the one that he got after Rosa, or even now, I mean, we know that he's had a big amount of impact in putting this squad together. And to be fair, I don't think he made the argument that the squad isn't that great, but I think people do make the argument for him, which I don't really buy.
No, for sure. I mean, I would make the argument, especially for the number 8 position, because I do not believe that Emre Can or Özcan or Sabitzer, for that matter, are really great connectors between defense and attack, and I think there could be players that do better. It's funny, I was just thinking about how Mo Dahoud in these days would probably be really big help for Dortmund. Just because of his ability to play a vertical ball, and considering Dortmund don't always want to hold on to the ball for long, but have sometimes like these panicky phases in their games where they win possession and then try to play as vertically and as quickly forward as possible, but it instantly breaks down because they just don't have the players who who are quick thinkers, if you will, to really utilize the time and space that they do win with the turnover they force. So that's somewhat tragic how many attacks have petered out for Dortmund and how many times they then are not in a very advantaged position as they once again give the ball away. So it's been very chaotic just because Dortmund lacked the precision and especially the speed. I think this is something that I really realized in this game, how long it takes for players to make a pass when they're on a counterattack, how long it takes for them to make a switch of play and all these kind of things. Everyone is holding on to the ball way too long because everyone, I feel like, needs to scan the area first and see what's going on, because there, and here comes my favorite word, are very few automatisms. and so it always feels like, okay, I need to step on the ball, I have to look around who is where, and instead of just knowing, okay, there is a run into that particular space where I can just pass the ball into, that is something that has been completely lacking, and I feel like it's something in professional football that is utilized a lot. So you can see it with good teams when the ball is played into space and there is no one home, the ball just runs out of play, but at least it shows that there's a certain scheme in place. Leverkusen have these situations every now and then where Frimpong isn't where he's supposed to be, and then the ball just runs out of play. For Dortmund, that happens very, very few times. If anything, if the ball runs out of play, it's just because they've or underhit the pass by a couple of meters. But I hear you. There is a lot of quality in this team, which is why they still do win a lot of games. Considering how poor they play right now. But I do agree with you. I think Terzić's days should be counted. Whether they are is an entirely different story. But Abel, if they were, who do you think should take over from him next summer?
Yeah, I mean, I think like the stuff that you mentioned, right? Like the automatisms and a lack of progression, right? Like that's almost always the coaching staff, because if the players are thinking on the pitch in terms of like where's the next pass going, that probably means that this isn't really like deep drilled into in terms of details, and you do see. I mean, you mentioned Dahoud, and I mean, I think the Serbia teams, which I think that's been a huge trend in football recently, is this patterned build up, which obviously there's a lot of basically like manufacturing transitions and a lot of choices that are available. There is some element of freedom, but then there's a lot of it which is really well rehearsed, and you see this trickle down to the Bundesliga, to Sebastian Hoeneß, right, in Stuttgart, who have taken many of these elements. Fabian Hürzeler at St. Pauli as well. So I'm mentioning just those coaches as ones who are definitely like available and would be candidates. I think obviously Nagelsmann was mentioned even before. I think that would make sense as well. Especially he has quite a lot to, I don't want to say prove, but like there's a motivation factor probably for him as well after the Euros, and depending on how that goes, of course. But then again, if that goes too well for Germany, then he might not be available for that. So, but I do think that somebody like Sebastian Hoeneß, although he's, I would say, pretty big candidate for the Bayern job, for obvious reasons that I think everyone knows. Hürzeler, who I think still hasn't renewed the contract in St. Pauli, and I've written quite a bit on them this season, and it's really, really one of the most fun teams to watch in football. So like, I think basically my short answer to this is that most of the teams that Dortmund should be looking to, or most of the coaches, are the ones who can do something in possession. Because the other tricky thing to Dortmund's lack of identity is that it also isn't like an aggressive team out of possession. Like they're defending about 5 yards deeper on average. The counter pressing is much worse. It's pretty passive. So that's what I mean, where it's like sort of, okay, at least like you think, okay, well, the in possession isn't great, but then at least they're like maniacs out of possession, or at least like they're forcing stuff, but they aren't. So, and in those cases, I'm always just skeptical. So yeah, I would say like, if you're just looking in Germany, like obviously Nagelsmann should be number 1, but then Hoeneß 2, and then maybe Hürzeler 3, and then there's some other ones that I think would probably be a little bit more left field candidates, but I think these 3 certainly at least like put them in the category of viable and if not even like desirable.
Yeah. All good shouts. Obviously, I personally don't like Nagelsmann just from a personality standpoint. I'm not sure if that would be the very best fit. To be honest, because I don't think he chimes well with Dortmund fans overall. But I do believe he would have the advantage of probably playing a better brand of football, and then a lot of things are forgiven. I just don't know for the long term if him and Dortmund are really on a level, because it harmonizes or not in different ways, but certainly right now I think I would actually take Nagelsmann over the football that I have to watch on a bi-weekly basis. So sad times. But a little outlook to the reverse fixture. Obviously Schlotterbeck will be out because he has been booked and will be suspended for that game. But if there's one thing evident, I think the gap in individual quality is actually quite big, and Dortmund did, at least in that regard, really play well against PSV, who did really struggle, especially also physically. At the end of the game, PSV were really, really tired as well. So I do believe that if this game is played in the Westfalenstadion, where Dortmund do play with a bit more, say, ambition, then I do actually believe that they will probably make it out of this tie. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's like the reasonable assumption. And I mean, I think like having watched Eredivisie quite a bit, like last couple of months, like you definitely notice like the differences in terms of quality and intensity, and certainly even like the last few years of Eredivisie, like just since I guess Ajax have been bad, but and it's just and in PSV as well. Like I think it must be really difficult for them to go from that to like the Champions League and then do well there, and just in terms of their squad is like 21, 22-year-olds who probably aren't used to it, or like a 33-year-old who can maybe only do 60 minutes of intensity. And then Bush has, to his credit, he's always demanded that, and I do think he's managed it pretty well. But yeah, I think losing Schlotterbeck is obviously bad for the build-up, because his sort of diagonal balls, which aren't really utilized, like I think one of the things is like he's not nearly like the Freiburg Schlotterbeck who's taking these chances, or he almost like looks timid in many ways. It's like it's sort of coached out of him where he's like, and it's probably the mistakes. Like it's not as like dramatic as like Upamecano, but you definitely see the confidence like sort of almost sucked out of him. And then the bigger issue with that is that Hummels has just dropped off so much with the ball. Like obviously he's still making all these like important tackles and box defending and all that stuff. Like the instincts are still there, but with the ball, he just never takes any chances. Like he's not just playing quickly. Like there's so many of these instances where, the free player is there and he's just like not willing to take that risk. And we don't know with Zule anymore, really.
Yeah.
I mean, he's just kind of, I would say he's the lost man on the team, but then there's Ben Sebaini. So like, he's probably even more lost than him. So, But again, like you still could play him Rechan. Like I think that probably would also be a reasonable thing to just play him, since you're kind of playing with the back three anyway, and then just play like a Brandt as one of the two, or I don't know, like just someone a little bit. I thought Zabitzer did well in this game overall, because of like
he's having a really good stint right now.
Yeah, and he's important, but it's like I think that's also a sign where like if he's like the sort of most consistent midfielder, that's probably,
when Sabitzer leads your shot creating actions, it's not going well.
yeah, and then even in this game, like I think it was like Malen had I think 5 shots out of the 8, and as you mentioned, so. Yeah, probably I would just play. I don't think Brandt is in great form, obviously, but I would still play him over Royce in terms of, just the guy who's able to break pressure, like particularly in this game, because I think that's the thing with Royce now is that he's limited to kind of combinations and counterattacks, and I just don't think like you're getting counterattacks because the build-up isn't that as great anymore. And I guess the fullback issues are somewhat solved with Ryerson coming back and Matson, so that's good. Like it's you're not running Meunier out there anymore. And,
well, the hopes are, and obviously this is Dortmund, so you have to take it with a massive grain of salt, given this game is on March 13.
Right.
That by then Adeyemi and Aller will be back. And but you don't know who else in the meantime will pick up an injury, so we'll see. I mean Dortmund play Hoffenheim next at home, and then they have 2 away games against Union Berlin and Werder Bremen. So it's going to be a bit more choppy before the business end of the season really starts, because after Eindhoven you play Frankfurt, you play
there's
Munich,
a crazy schedule,
Stuttgart.
Yeah.
So these are the games,
Leverkusen
especially like
and Bayern, right?
Yeah, so dropping points against Heidenheim and Wolfsburg really hurts you, because the schedule really does pick up toward the final stages of the season. I don't really feel like I need to preview Hoffenheim in detail, because what's the point? I'd rather talk a little bit more Champions League. So, Abel, this was fun.
The one win in the 15 league games isn't really doing it for you.
This was certainly fun, and thank you for providing your insight. I really can't wait to see if any coaches on your shortlist are being presented next summer or not.
Yeah, well, it sounds like an invitation for me to come back in the summer to discuss one. I mean, I guess it had then I mean, there's probably other candidates out there, and I do think that I think Terzic is probably the kind of coach who or like sort of club servant, right? In the positive connotation of this term, is that who would probably step aside or like go to a different position, or just see that it's like, well, he's done sort of everything he could, and now it's probably time to kind of start a new thing, because it's like, I think that really the ceiling of this club and the reality, or the ceiling of this club is higher, right? But the reality of this club is that they're like Champions League club, but it's like 4th or 5th, which I guess like 5th place is probably going to get a Champions League spot now, right? Given the coefficient rankings. So, but that's where they are, right? And I just, like, if you look at the top 3, you just don't even, just don't see them. Like, it's not on the sort of same level, right? Even as a Stuttgart, which sounded crazy, like even, I don't know, 6 months ago, right? But that's the reality. And there's no way, like, leadership and the board is, one thing we know is that they're not going to like be satisfied with that, right? So, as much loyalty they might have, they also are smart enough and pragmatic enough to see, okay, well, this needs to change, right?
Yeah, definitely. Let's hope you're right about that. Anyway, Abel, if you have any projects or anything to promote, be my guest.
I think, I do, but I don't think it's anything that's really like Dortmund.
It doesn't have to be Dortmund related.
Well, I just did the Tifo football podcast on Xabi Alonso going to Liverpool potentially, and how that would go, and that's something that came out, I think.
I think that's interesting in the sense that he's not going to Bayern.
Yeah.
Because I think for Dortmund it would be disastrous if Xabi Alonso goes to Bayern.
Yeah, I think so as well. And I mean we don't know, like, we just Bayern's history of doing last minute things and mostly doing it to Dortmund. So I guess maybe that's the refreshing side of it from a Dortmund perspective. There's no one to steal, right? They're not even good enough to like be the one that
Gregor Kobel, of course, which is my one big worry for him to be the Neuer replacement.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, we'll see what happens with Nubel, who's had a nice season, but yeah, he's. Although I think as we mentioned about the reshuffling and
I'd be too injury prone.
As you say in German, Bayern are definitely high on that list of needing to go through that. So it's tough to count that out. But yeah, I think Dortmund will be. I think they'll somehow benefit. I think from this in a twisted way, right? Because if just in the way that Nagelsmann might become available after the Euros, right? And especially if it doesn't go well, right? Then it's probably even bigger chance. Like, because if it goes well, then it's likely like someone in the Premier League could go for him, like a Chelsea or something, but or Barcelona or something. But I don't know. But then if we think about it from that perspective, so there could be some ramifications. But yeah, I just think it's Dortmund are in this weird place where like almost no one's really talking about them, and that's only their own making, right? Like they've kind of put themselves in this situation, right? Unfortunately.
I need the 442 magazine to bring out a front page where it says Europe's coldest team.
Right, yeah.
All right, that's a good point to end it, Abel. Thank you so much for coming on. And we'll catch up in the summer to see if you were right or not.
You got it.
Thank you so much. See you soon. Goodbye. And everyone out there, as always, thank you for listening. We'll be back again soon. Goodbye.